Welcome to the Athlete Climate Academy, where we engage with athletes, scientists and communicators about the critical conversations that we need to have regarding the climate crisis. We've got epic guests for you today. Ed Salisbury and Will Tucker, two of the three guys, John Moy being the other one, behind the Last Ride project, an initiative combining adventure and environmental advocacy. Through their challenging journeys, they show stunning landscapes, have amazing adventures, but critically raise awareness about climate change. Their work inspires and drives important conversations about preserving our planet for future generations. Perfect guests for the Athlete Climate Academy podcast. Ed, Will, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Hugh. Thank you, mate.
Hey. Great to be along.
Our absolute pleasure. So, the Last Ride project, can you tell us a little bit about it? What sparked the idea to get it going? Will, take us through it.
The original idea definitely comes somewhere in the cranium of Ed on a trip in North Africa, I think, where he sort of was climbing the largest mountain in that region, and it occurred to him to think about climbing other tall mountains. And I guess that motivation, well, we were both on the same ski team with White Dot Skis for a long time, and had been making films together, but through that process, and eventually had run out of ideas, and you know, coming to the next one, Ed decided that the highest mountain on each continent seemed feasible to him. Before it seemed too stupid, he'd already got me on the phone, and I was probably too ignorant at the time, on pretty directly say, to understand the weight of what that suggestion was, and just kind of try to be positive. And you know, Ed had always come up with the silly ideas, and then we both just sort of, you know, get on and get some plans together and see how feasible it is. And in this particular one, by the time we'd sort of looked at Kilimanjaro and Puncak Jaya, rather than it being a huge logistical challenge, it was like, this is a completely different story to what we thought it was, and we're going to be the last people to do this, not the first people in one sense to do it anyway. So that just led it into a whole nother journey. Instead of Googling, you know, how much does a pack need to weigh on Denali and what we're taking with us, we were Googling how much ice is being lost in Alaska and who do we need to talk to about that. And we went on a very different direction challenge-wise to what I thought it was to start off with, and it still is all of that other challenge of climbing those mountains and trying to ski down them. But it's for me, that is now just the secondary thing that we need to get done to have enough sort of weight in our messaging that people will see the stories of the people who live in the you know, the agricultural land around Kilimanjaro and who are going to struggle with irrigation in Tanzania generally. So that's about the summary of where the Last Ride project comes as a little seed of thought, and ends up 4 mountains climbed, 4 continents visited, 50 to 100 terabytes of interviews, and you know, science and experience and fear and all those other things that come along with it. I guess it's been a hell of a ride.
I noticed that you've already interviewed one of my old students from National Geographic, Hamid. He was in one of your interviews as well. Yeah, I trained him in. He was I run training sessions for National Geographic, and he was one of our. I hope he came across well. He always does, to be fair. He's a bit of a legend.
Bright chap. Just so charismatic as a human being. Brilliant guy.
And Ed, those stories those interviews, you know, you collected those. How have they been for you so far?
It's been a real mix, because I think the real key to the project, like Will described them, was you have the echo chamber as such, with the people who engage with the climate crisis and try to understand it. And then you have a whole new audience of which we can reach through skiing. How do we interest people with us climbing and skiing down mountains, and pull that other kind of people interested in that, and then talk to them about climate change? And so it was kind of picking interesting people, interviews from all sorts of walks of life and backgrounds, people on the mountain, off the mountain, that would kind of speak to those people and tell that well-rounded story. So speaking from anyone from your local farmers at the base of a mountain to glaciologists who have been studying Arctic amplification for the last 30, 40 years. I'm really understanding that story through people who are really clued up, and people who just see it naturally affecting their everyday lives.
Yeah, it's one of the things that really struck me looking at the trailers you put out so far, and just some of the content you put out, is how much you lean into talking to people who are on the ground and live in it. We see so many documentaries come out from big brands, outdoor brands, ski brands, climbing brands, and the likes. That is, this said adventurer goes to said place and does said thing, and then this is the stories they come back with. But your stuff seems to be not the opposite. It's like we go to said place and do said thing, and this is the stories that people are telling from that place. Will, was that a conscious choice that you guys were leaning into, that it's not about us, it's about the people who are there?
Yeah, I think that's in one sense John's creative style, and he's always searching as a director to not sort of facilitate something and make you do something, but for us to just crash into that experience and for it to kind of happen to us. So in one sense, it's born out of that directing style from John, and we are trying to make a film, right? But in another really pure sense, like in that first story of how we got into this, we are crashing into the experience with every step of the way. And honestly, some of the people you've met, sort of their challenges and struggles in life make ours completely pale into insignificance. And I think that's what we want the film to do in one sense, is to sort of make the unachievable seem achievable, because that's what climate change feels like to a lot of people. And then once you realize it's achievable, and you know, if your other everyday goals are maybe hard and you're focused on them right now, but there's other people focusing on those things and doing better at it. There's other people focusing on the great big challenges in the world and achieving those. It's like, I hope we were just inspiring more positive psychology around the concept of looking at of a challenge through the people we meet, you know. And it's not us that's doing that. It's literally that just challenges get easier when you're positive and you bump into other positive people who give energy towards solutions, you know.
I think that's
it is.
The biggest. Sorry,
go on.
I think it's just Will echoed it perfectly there. It's like that's the thing we found is some of the people in the worst positions, and I mean issues are insurmountable. I found it incredibly hard walking into people's homes and them offering us as much as they have and really wanting to engage in this conversation and tell people what's going through their lives. Those people have got the most amount of hope, and those people have got the most amount of drive and are really positive about the situation or really passionate about it. And I think that kind of has spoke to me and Will the most, is it's, if you haven't got hope, then what have you got? And it's not the hope of, oh, I hope it'll be okay, and not worrying about it. It's really going through those challenges, understanding how close to the edge / past the edge we are, and then having that drive, passion, and hope to move forward. And that's been the most inspiring thing from this project altogether, is just seeing how much human resilience there are.
Yeah, it's the one thing that, if you ask me what's my most optimistic take on climate change, is the people are amazing. And what's my most pessimistic take on climate change is that some people are terrible. So there's this paradox of like, there's some people around the world are absolutely amazing and they'll be the ones who solve and are the hope through the climate crisis. And then there's also some people who are like, oh, you might be the worst person I've ever come across in terms of like facilitating the climate crisis and the likes. So the challenges so far, how many...
That, though, Hugh? Just to say that I think that's my personal journey in the Last Ride project, and a little bit as an antithesis to Ed. You know, I came into this as a pessimist and a cynic, and certainly through the depths of PTSD, which I picked up through later on in the project and other accidents happening, that I've become just impossibly negative, and I've been that problem because of that. You know, and that's the difference there, or the step is we can just like go down that journey in a negative way, or we can go down, it's almost exactly the same journey, but you just view it positively. And then every one of those steps gets a bit easier, and you meet that many more people who are taking those positive steps, and it's a different rabbit hole to be in. You're not worrying about how far down the rabbit hole you are. You're just happy with the fact that you're in a rabbit hole and you're working to get somewhere, you know. And that's, I guess, is one of the big messages of the Last Ride, is get out there, ski on those mountains, immerse yourself in nature with your activity. It'll make you a more positive person, and then you'll view these challenges positively. There'll be indicators of the problems that are there because you're out in nature, and you'll react to them with a solution rather than not noticing them and then going like that's someone else's problem, because that won't be the type of person you are. You know?
Yeah, I saw that in the trailer, Ed, you were talking about being out there and being on the, I think it was Killy. You were saying that watching these glaciers disappear is one of the most heartbreaking things you've seen and done.
Yeah, it's heart wrenching. Yeah, I mean, we've come here from a very privileged point of view. I mean, Will skied all of our lives. We've been incredibly grateful to be able to ski in some breathtaking places, and that was the real kind of driver to accidental activism from me and Will, was our passion, our life force, our things which have created so many friends, so many memories. That's our jobs, is being taken from us. And it's one thing to read about it, to see photos about it, to listen to podcasts about it, but to actually go to a place that you plan to ski this line and you get there and it's not there, and it will never be there again. And to sit on top of, I mean, they looked like icebergs. They're just these huge pieces of ice sat in a desert, and just watching them evaporate into the atmosphere, knowing that they won't return. That's like the base level of it. Oh no, I can't go skiing on a mountain. It's awful that we're talking about last descent. I should never be talking about last descents in my generation, but it's everything else which then hangs on to that. The lack of precipitation in the local area, that pushed on by deforestation, pushing the wet seasons, which used to be 3 wet seasons, down to 2, which used to be reliable. Now those wet seasons come and go when they want. Seasonal rivers drying up. Then you're talking about the real issue of people not being able to live in that immediate area, having to move to cities, then climate migration, and there's so much more which then hits on from that. And I think that's kind of what Will was alluding to, that rabbit hole of, it's what brings you to that point of going, okay, I need to switch on. I need to do as much as I can to understand about the situation and deliver either that knowledge or do whatever you can with the best skill sets you can, whether it's filmmaking, whether it's podcast, whether it's direct action, and then moving forward and taking that action. I think that was kind of the moment stood on that piece of ice at Killy, and just me and Will just breaking down and being like, skiing in graveyards, like, what are we doing? Like, Will skied a line there, and we're pretty sure it's the first person to see it, and simultaneously the last person to see it, because it's not there. And just like that moment of, what are we doing? Like, it's horrific.
But it also just keeps hammering home the trivial nature of what, we're just going skiing, and it's just this kind of, I don't know, frivolous challenge, and it's our way of connecting with the world. And it's because I skied that line, I'm now aware if there'd be people who can't eat food in that region soon, and I wasn't aware otherwise. If it's such a twisted way of finding out about it in one sense, but it's so real, and that's our little journey of like, whew, we better focus more deeply on the greater problems at hand.
But that's we'd always encourage at Athlete Climate Academy for people to access the world through their sport, and that's largely how athletes do it. We run through cities, we ski through forests, we climb up mountains and across glaciers, and that's the way that we intersect and interact with the world. So, it's not a bad thing to be accessing it in your way, but at the same time, knowing that, like you say, the impact, because some people say to me sometimes, like, okay, we'll lose some glaciers. Like, I've never even seen a glacier, so why does that even matter? They're nice to be in the outdoors world, sometimes call them our playgrounds and whatnot. But knowing, like you say, that, in the Himalaya, for example, 1 billion people rely on the glaciers and the snowpack in the Himalayas. So what does that mean for those people? In the Alps, about 40% of Europe relies on the runoff from the Alpine region. So if changing, yeah, we lose a playground, but also that means downstream, like you say, people won't get fresh water for drinking, for the agriculture, and for everything else. So as long as we keep connected in our minds, it's okay, this glacier is disappearing. This is what it means for everyone. I think that's a fair thing to do, right?
The last step on that for me is it is a bit more widespread. And of course, in the UK, people are largely, I wouldn't say indifferent to it, but less aware of it. The capital city of Ecuador, Quito, has 2 million people, and a quarter of its public utility drinking water is glacial meltwater. And it's on the equator. So most people are just going to think, it's north-south. It's a problem in Antarctica and the Arctic. But just that problem is it's in Venezuela. It's in places you don't expect that really high altitude glaciers supply the water to large human populations that are going to be displaced. And it's just it's another layer that people need to be aware of, and again, not be overwhelmed by, but be like understanding that if we put the coal-fired power station further away from the glacier, then it would melt less quickly. And if we just don't take that on, then we can keep covering them in PM 2.5 and melting them quicker, or we can just make a really small systemic change again and make a really big difference to our environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So is it 2 down, 5 left to go on the project?
4 down and 3 to go, Ed.
4 down, 3 to go. So 4 down, 3 to go. You've got a big push left to go in terms of the logistics and getting out there and doing it. What are the long-term goals in terms of climate readiness for the Last Ride project? What are the big changes you'd like to see? Is it education? Is it advocacy? Working with people like climate change advocacy projects? How would you like to see the outdoor community shift in the way that we think about climate change?
I mean, there's 2 sides to the project. We've got the film and the Last Ride as a community. So I was kind of looking at earlier with the film, is really reaching out to a much broader audience. I think a lot of people watch climate change docs or see them on streaming channels and think, it's not quite for me. Or I've heard 101 million facts about climate change. I just want to sit on the sofa and be excited by something. So how can we use skiing and climbing and get people really excited about crazy skiing on some of the biggest mountains around the world and pull that audience in and educate them about the issues? Not just spewing out facts, but really use the climbing skiing as a vehicle to educate people and make people think about the climate. I mean, they don't need to go to the Himalaya and ski the Lutze face. They can make those changes in their own world, in their own life, on their day-to-day business. So we kind of take that from the film, and then how can we create a larger community where people can really make an impact? So from kind of the outreach of the project, of the film, we can then direct people into actual resources, whether it's through the website of basically educating people what is the base level, what is climate change, for example, and then kind of push them towards either partners that we work with. So, for example, if someone does want to go skiing and they can calculate their carbon footprint, and then they can offset their carbon footprint through earthly or through other offsetting means, or they can actually understand that, okay, well, I really want to go on this trip here. Okay, well, firstly, could I go on a trip somewhere else, or how can I lower the carbon footprint for that? And then educating on a larger basis, like what can I do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's through voting, whether it's through direct action, whether it's what I buy, what I eat, and actually understanding what impact that has. So that's kind of the 2 halves of the project as such. But the real big one is just getting people outside, getting people active within their sport, within their hobby, and understanding the changes and the effects that's having on those. Because that's what got me and Will into actually understanding and caring and wanting to learn as much as possible, wanting to make a change within our lives and within other people's, is seeing the effect it has on us. And I think it's so easy, especially within the UK, especially if you're in the city, to just kind of think, oh, it's getting hotter, or oh, it rains a lot at once. But how can we get people passionate and interested in it, and not just taking what they see on the news, negative or positive.
Yeah, I mean, you say we're in the UK and the city is getting hotter. We just had an Arctic blast. I was out wild camping a couple of nights ago. It's bloody getting cold.
Yeah,
That Arctic blast that came down was really cold. So, Will, 4 down, 3 to go. What are the ones you've done so far, and what are the ones you got left? What's the next mountain?
I suppose if I start with the first jeopardy was getting the mountain in Russia out of the way first and completing Mount Elbrus. And we also started there because it's in Europe, a little bit more similar to the styles of alpinism and mountaineering we understand well, and cheaper and all those other things. So we've done Elbrus in Russia, Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, Denali in Alaska, and Aconcagua in South America. And our next plan is to head in October, start of October, we'll hopefully be in West Papua. It's an island of Indonesia, climbing Puncak Jaya, formerly known as Carsten's Pyramid, if some people might know it by that name in the UK still. And then, the big, I think my favorite trip is going to be Antarctica in lots of ways. It's cold and extreme, but it's not the tallest mountain we climb, and definitely the most sort of far away, crazy place to visit that any child's mind could have envisaged. And then the final challenge will be Everest, we hope, next summer, with a plan to ski the Lhotse Kulwar. And see how we go.
Yeah.
That's the plan. It seems like it's going to be a wild one, but loads of stories to share from along the way. So, you've got the logistics of setting all that up, actually doing it, training for it, etc., etc. You got John on board as well, who's wrangling all the footage that you get back from it as well. So, what are the things you're looking forward to most in the next 3 mountains?
Definitely not carrying camera kit.
Right? It's a pain in the ass.
I'm crying.
I mean, it's an extra 20 kilos, doesn't matter where you go. And when you're talking carrying a bag up of 40 kilos, 38 kilos, it definitely adds to it.
I always feel like I want to say John has truly just grown at this incredible rate throughout it. He came into this as an amazing director and camera person, and he came into it as a pretty good skier, but not an alpinist at all, and not a climber. And we got him to the top of Denali. I feel like this is an insanely formative moment for him, that he realized like he had it in him all along and he could do these things. And he skied down that insane mountain like with that camera gear. But equally, he's the camera guy, and he didn't come into this as an athlete. And I was already planning to carry a paraglider, and like skis are heavier than we're already like kilos upon kilos above what we should be taking if we had a reasonable plan with the mountains. And then, by the time we've added the charging systems, the cameras, John probably isn't going to want to carry like the extra load, so that's on me and Ed. And Ed's already started this kilo at 60 kilos, and he's in at 72 now. And like, we're getting bigger and pushing more, and it's a lot of challenge for sure.
I think going forwards, like the big ones, I know for me anyway, is Western Papua, Indonesia. That's the mountain which really started it all off for us, and that's the mountain which got us most inspired. I mean, it used to be the second tallest ski resort in the world. I mean, it's in the middle of the rainforest, in the middle of the second largest rainforest in the world. And I mean, it used to be huge. It used to be 80 meters deep, over 5 kilometers of glacier. A crazy Scottish earl in the 70s and the 80s built a ski resort up there, and now it's set to disappear by the end of this year. And you've got glaciers now which are 60 meters long and less than 7 meters deep. And to go there and witness that, I think it's a real double-edged sword. Like that was the driver for us getting there. However, it's the real kind of poster child of climate change. Like just you're dancing on kind of
thin ice,
on gravestone at that point. It's horrible, but just to witness that, and I mean, in the area that it is, with the largest open pit gold mine in the world, it's been in a fight for independence since the late 60s. It really is, in all aspects, the poster child for what is wrong and what's going on, and really pushing big industries, which is owned by global conglomerates, with a glacier which is disappearing and losing people's faith, spirits, losing people's fresh drinking water, changing the climate around the local area. And it's really got everything in it. And from a storytelling point of view, I mean, if we can share that one with the world, I think that's a film in itself. I mean, it's hardly going to be the best skiing in the world. Like, I think a lot of this trip has been climbing very tall mountains to ski very little lines. Like, I think Will can speak for it as well, but I mean, at least 2 out of those 4 mountains we've climbed to almost 7,000 meters on one and almost 6,000 meters on another, and skied 150 meters. It really is shocking. It's more of a climbing trip than it is a skiing project. But it's, yeah, that's for me the ones I'm kind of really excited for and scared. I mean, it's a huge emotional roller coaster, and to kind of tie that in with skiing really consequential lines and climbing stuff where you have to have your head switched on, as well as trying to take everything in and deal with the emotional torment of, well, we can't ski that, what's happening here, how's that affecting everyone here? And it's a big one to juggle, that's for sure.
Yeah. Would you, Will?
And what's the question is what's my what I'm looking forward to most, or the most memorable moment?
Memorable moments that you've had, and definitely the things that you're looking forward to, kind of whether it's sharing those stories or whether it's skiing specific lines. What are you looking forward to in the next 3?
Wow, that's so difficult to boil down, because 100 names come into your head that absolutely deserve to be talked about as like the most important person I met that had this crazy story that needs to be put out. And but I think for the maybe like one of the most impactful shots, there's one from Russia that comes to mind, but I'm going to lean on one from Chile where Ed stood in front of a pile of clothes that most of us in the Western world will have no idea that this exists, and we just assume that the fashion chain kind of works and there isn't too much waste in it, and most clothes get worn by people. But Ed stood in front of a 60,000-ton pile of clothing, which, because of a free port in the thing below it, is just like constantly topped up. It's 60,000 tons a year, roughly, that gets put into it, and they just set it on fire and use the onshore wind to, like, it'll disappear across the Atacama, and we'll not worry about it too much. And it's one of those that, like, everybody on the planet's roughly culpable for that, for, like, turning a blind eye to how the fashion industry operates, or 85% of the clothes in that pile are never worn. They're just made in the global south, shipped to the global north. Maybe shouldn't use those generalized monikers, but they're made somewhere that labor's cheap. They're shipped to somewhere where the money is free and people are just wasting it, and they then decide they don't want it, and it just gets set on fire. So a petrochemical goes through this huge process for nothing. I've rabbled on about the ins and outs of it for ages, but it's just one of the most clear moments of, like, no one can argue that that's a good thing. Like, whichever level of the climate crisis you've been on, if you see our film and you see that moment, you'll just be like, well, we could do better at that. So you'd engage then, I hope, with humanity-wise, that process could be done better. And at the moment, it's really disastrous the way it is, and we can't necessarily cope with the level of disaster that it is forever. So we better stop turning a blind eye to it and put that out there. In terms of, and I guess that's it ties in with what I'm looking forward to the most is maybe the end, maybe not the completion. I really hope that in one sense there's no satisfaction in finishing the mountains more than there's the if we finish those mountains, then hopefully you'll hear the story of Maria Raya Fuentes from Chile, or you'll hear the story of Estelle from Alaska, and this story will have an impact, and it will get somewhere, and the people who we've met along the way will get their voices heard, and that'll make a difference, I guess, is the only thing we should be looking forward to. And I'm lying if I don't say that I'd like to ski down a line with my friend here and there, but that's it's like secondary. Sure.
It is the thing that I'm most looking forward to is seeing the films, obviously, but hearing the stories that you're telling. I often, like when training explorers and athletes and whatever in climate advocacy and activism and the likes, is telling those stories. That's the thing that we're always kind of pushing for, because stories change lives. Like, we've seen it time and again. And it's amazing that you guys are not only doing something absolutely epic and huge, but at the forefront of your minds is the stories of the people that you can tell along the way. So if you want to hear those stories, where do they go? Head over to the website?
So there's a small group of stories on the website, and then the large bulk will be released throughout the film, and then throughout a YouTube, podcast, social media. Once we've kind of picked out what we need with the film, and then we're going to release full-length interviews and full-length kind of mini-clip stories of the areas that we're going to after the project's been released, after the film's been released. So you're probably looking at end of 2025 into 2026 when those kind of long-form chunks will be released. But we are going to work with a few other different brands, partners, and charities with the next 3 mountains going forward, which will release kind of longer form stuff with them, really digging into those stories and effects on the mountains. So, yeah, we'll send the links and check out those bits.
Yeah, perfect. So, LastRideProject.com and Last Ride Project across social medias, everything except MySpace, I imagine. Ed, Will, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we're going to be looking towards you guys and hearing those stories more over the next couple of years. And Will, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Hugh. And just as a shout out and a plug for yourself as well, if you tuned in to listen to the Last Ride Project, then make sure you listen to the last episode of the Athlete Climate Academy with Estelle Chuk, and talking about like the value of story, and hopefully we're a nice sort of step on from how she laid out the inspiration or the reason to go and make stories. And yeah. Thank you for all your work, Hugh.
Internal plug.
Yeah, it comes back. But basically, I just want to thank you for all the work. And I first saw you on a panel that my girlfriend was moderating actually at Blue Earth Summit sort of 2 years ago, and thought there's someone who's sort of trying to put their head into the right stuff and doing something about it, and it's always an inspiration. So thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, lads. Thanks so much. And LastRideProject.com. Head over there, watch what you guys are doing, and we'll see you next time on the Athlete Climate Academy.
Thank you.